Hi everyone, my name is Sive and welcome to Stories in Sive. Today's video, I am going to be recommending you my top 5 favorite horror stories. Today I'm going to be talking about a wide variety of different horrors, all falling under that same genre, but that touch on a number of different subjects and can appeal to a different type of reader. I am by no means the connoisseur of horror, but I'm just here to share in honor of Halloween and all of our spooky vibes that have been going on, my favorite horror stories, my favorite horror books that I have read. I'm going to be talking about the summary of each book as well as talking about elements of each story that I liked specifically about that book to give you a better idea of if this book might be for you. I'll talk about the level of interest, I'll talk about the level of atmosphere, as well as genuine scariness. Was I terrified? Did I feel the suspense? So let's just get right into it. Also, these are not in any specific order, these are just the top 5 horror books for me. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Troop by Nick Cutter, and this story follows a troop of Boy Scouts who every year go on the same weekend trip to the Canadian wilderness, and they go on this island and camp out for a weekend. This troop arrives for their annual trip, and an intruder who is very, very sick comes up and tries to engage with them. The story essentially goes very downhill from there very quickly. That's the extent of the synopsis I will give. This book was super shocking. It was very fast-paced and genuinely horrifying. You got a little bit of those elements of the Lord of the Flies type of style. That concept was prevalent here, except obviously with a darker tone. If you are not a fan or you shy away from body horror, this book is not the book for you. The scariness factor hit on a lot of different levels of horror. It was psychological horror as well as physical horror. So that was one of the things that set this book apart for me. I thought it was exceptional. It freaked me out. I would recommend this book to anybody who would be interested in an isolated horror story and are okay with diseases and gross body horror stuff. So the first book is The Troop. The second book on my list is The Shining by Stephen King. And as you may know, this is a classic horror story. It has a movie adaptation that is very, very popular, and it follows a young family, the head of which is Jack Torrance, as they embark on Jack's new occupation as a sort of watchkeeper over the Overlook Hotel, a very, very famous story that you probably have heard of if you have not read it. This book is long, and if you have read Stephen King before, you might know the way people think about his writing is sometimes he drones on and gives a lot of excessive detail. This was my first Stephen King out of the 2 that I've read, so take this with a grain of salt. But I thought the writing was great. I thought it was quick. I was really entertained, and he did a great job crafting an ambiance. I would say that this book really hit hard in the atmosphere level. If you've ever wanted to try a story that takes an inanimate object and gives it a personality, you should try this book. The Overlook Hotel has such an ominous and potent presence in this book. It is genuinely scary, and I really enjoyed my read of this. Again, it's an isolated horror. They are in this hotel to watch over it in the winter months. This story also, like I mentioned, has a young family. I felt there was some kind of aloof commentary on family dynamics and marriage and fatherhood as well, so it kind of gave you a number of layers to the story to enjoy. I thought The Shining was fantastic, and it's definitely in my top 5. The next book on my list is Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. And this story is by the author of Perks of Being a Wallflower. And he kind of dropped off the face of the earth and like 10 years later came back with this 700 plus page horror story about a young boy who is moving into a new town and goes to a new school. He gets lost in the woods around his neighborhood for 6 days. And when he comes back out, he has an imaginary friend. The imaginary friend takes form in a voice that only he can hear, and is making a mission of his, a task that he needs to complete, very clear, and that is to build a treehouse in the woods by Christmas, or no one in his town will ever be the same again. This book is so layered, and it gets into a lot of kind of like existential stuff. There are fantasy elements in this, kind of like another dimension, very kind of like paired. It actually, now that I'm talking about it, it reminds me of Stranger Things, where there is an alternate dimension. So if you're up for some fantasy in mixed with your horror, you should check this out. Do not let the length of it put you off. It just allows for a lot of exploration of members of people in the town. So of course you're hearing from the kid and his mom. Her name is Kate. She is a single mom, and she is pretty much the main character of the story. Her and her son are the main characters. She is battling some stuff in her past and has come to this town for a new start. And so there's commentary on that and motherhood and being a single mom, as well as there's religious commentary, as the church here in this town is very prevalent, owning a business. There's a lot of experiences that you get to read from in this book. And hearing from the number of different people, these different characters walking through different stages of life, hearing from their perspective in the book added so much value to it for me, because the threat that is coming to this town has so much of a bigger consequence than just these two people. This book delivered on levels I was not expecting it to. I had zero expectations going in, and what I got was a layered story about this town being under siege. So with all of that being said, if you like reading from a number of perspectives and experiencing different people, having more of a character-driven narrative, this book provides that and is very nuanced about the horror inserts in each of these people's lives. It is definitely there. It's a baseline. It's like the foundation of all of these people's experiences, and they don't realize how infiltrated it is into their lives until there's this massive climax. So if you like that more, I would not call it slow paced, but the horror in it is a lot more nuanced in the beginning and as the story is kind of like being built. I think the creep factor for this book is way up there. The interest and intrigue was way up there for me because I love reading about people and people's lives and experiences. So in that way, this book was a really good fit for me. And if that sounds like stuff you might be interested in, you should definitely check out Imaginary Friend. The next book I'm going to talk about is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. And this story follows a group of explorers who are going to document and research in the Mariana Trench. There was a previous crew who had gone for a more entertainment style mockumentary of discovering some creatures that are supposedly here in the Mariana Trench, and it goes really, really wrong. This happened 10 years ago, and there is found footage style stuff of these creatures attacking and killing the members of the crew. This was published, and it had this whole thing of is it fake or is it not, and there was a lot of commentary on it. And now the current timeline, what we're reading from, is a young researcher named Victoria who is going to the Mariana Trench for her first time with this mockumentary in mind. She is looking to prove that these creatures are real once and for all. This book freaked me out. And let me tell you why. So this crew is built up of a lot of characters, some who are like super sus, some who are super gross. And the crew itself had its own little like psychological horror element. Also, if you are afraid of the ocean, this book is going to get you. If you are afraid of the ocean and thalassophobia? Yeah, thalassophobia, fear of the ocean, or more broad, fear of large open dark spaces that you can't see into. If you have that fear, this book is gonna scare you. It is so freaky. One thing to note that sets this book apart from the other ones on the list is it's much heavier on the fantasy end. So we're looking at these creatures and trying to prove, do they exist? So these creatures provide that fantasy element. This book is really high up there in the intrigue and interest for me. Proving of a creature, monsters, that sort of stuff, really up my alley. And I also really enjoyed this main character. I thought the writing was great, and there were a number of elements I really liked about this book. So I really enjoyed this book, and I think you might too. And the last book I'm going to talk about is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is a shorter horror story about a young couple who are kind of just starting to date, and they go on a road trip to meet the guy's parents. While on the road trip and when they sit down for a meal together, there are a number of things that start to feel very unsettling about the story. And the girl in the relationship who's like going to visit his parents, she's unnamed, and she starts to pick up on some of those unsettling things. This book is very eerie. It has a winter setting. Again, it's an isolated setting. This book is very atmosphere driven. Not a whole lot of like plot and action and crazy stuff going on, but it's definitely more the vibe and the feeling that I got while reading this book that just set it apart as something really special and really weird. The ending of this book was 100% my favorite thing about it. It is so cool and trippy. I think it was exceptional. The concept is just so good and original and creative, while also introducing all of these elements that just make you feel unsettled. And I think that's one of the things that sets this book apart from the other titles on this list, is because it isn't horror that is gory. It isn't horror that is terrifying, people running for their lives sort of horror. It is definitely psychological. It's written to make you think and make you feel very uncomfortable. And I think that it accomplished what it set out to do for me personally. And also, it's a good option for those who are maybe looking into the horror genre but don't think they can handle a lot of gore and a lot of really intense scenes of terror. So that would be another reason why this is on the list, to make it a little bit more diverse so that we can have a list of books that anybody can find a title that might work for them. So this is a good one if you're looking to try out the horror genre but don't know what you can handle just yet. And that is it. Those are my top 5 horror books as of right now. Out of all the horror that I've read, these are my personal top 5. As the Halloween season is in full swing, I thought there is no better time than now to discuss some of these books and chat about some of them with you. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoy videos like this and vlogs, TBRs, wrap-ups, and recommendations, feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you. But other than that, thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!